From a princess extracting a brutal revenge, to the dignitaries forced to kiss a rotting czar, to the bizarre healing skills of Rasputin, and the convicted cannibal fighting Putin's war in Ukraine. These are 50 of the most insane moments in Russian history, from over a millennia ago to now. Number 50. In the 10th century, Olga of Keefe was the princess of Kievan Rus, an empire that encompassed what is today Russia and Ukraine. Olga's husband, Prince Igor, had been murdered by Mal, the prince of her rival kingdom. After killing her husband, Mal immediately tried to propose to Olga as a power grab. Instead of rejecting Mal's advances, she invited him and his entourage to Kiev for a formal meeting. When they arrived, she led them to the edge of a ditch her soldiers had dug and ordered that Mal and all of his men be thrown into the ditch and buried alive. And somehow the most insane ones are further down the list. Number 49. The KGB might be infamous, but they weren't the first shady organization to repress enemies of the Russian state. Turns out the idea of having a secret police goes back almost as far as Russia itself. Ivan the Terrible founded a secret organization called the Oprechnikya back in 1565. They were his personal guards tasked with suppressing anyone who could potentially threaten Ivan's power. Through the Oprechnikya, Ivan the Terrible executed, exiled, and tortured prominent members of Russia's influential boyar families, claiming that they were part of a conspiracy to overthrow him. Speaking of terrible Ivan's terrible crimes. Number 48. Ivan the Terrible's second oldest son and heir apparent was Zarovich Ivan Ivanovich, who by all accounts had a very close relationship with his father. It's said that he even once saved his father from an assassination attempt. But Ivan the Terrible didn't get that name for nothing. He had a notorious temper, and it's widely believed that he killed his son in a fit of rage in 1581. Tensions had been building between father and son during the Livonian War. Allegedly, the argument that led to the fatal physical fight was started by the elder Ivan criticizing the way that his son's wife was dressed. Number 47. During the period following the death of Fyodor I, who died without an heir, there were multiple people vying for control of the Russian throne. False Dmitri was one of those people. He was an impostor who in 1695 claimed to be the youngest son of Ivan the Terrible, Dmitri of Oglich. With the support of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, false Dmitri invaded Russia and was able to stage a coup against Fyodor II with the support of the boyars. He would be later killed by these same boyars a year later because, well, they hated his positive views on Catholicism and willingness to let foreigners into the country. Number 46. Tsar Peter I, also known as Peter the Great, enacted a beard tax in 1698. His reason for doing so? It was all part of his efforts to modernize Russia and help it better compete with the other European powers. The idea for the beard tax came to him when he was traveling around Europe incognito, researching daily life in other countries. In his travels, he noticed that beards weren't fashionable in most parts of Europe. When he came home, he hosted a reception at the palace where he pulled out a razor and he had his diplomatic guests line up to get shaved. Now let's skip 70 years to the madness of a new dynasty. Number 45. Tsar Peter III was an extremely unpopular ruler during his reign. He also had an extremely rocky marriage to his wife Catherine. So, in 1762, Catherine conspired with her lover, Grigory Orlov, to overthrow her husband. In June of that year, Catherine led a procession of both military and civilians and marched on the Winter Palace, where she was proclaimed the true heir to the throne by the Archbishop of Novgorod. Catherine and her mob then chased her husband out of the palace, and a day later, Peter was arrested and forced to abdicate. Number 44. According to official records, Peter III died of a stroke only 6 months after abdicating the throne to Catherine. But historians have debated his cause of death for centuries, and some think that Catherine might have had a hand in it. A popular theory is that Peter III died at the hands of Alexei Orlov, the brother of Grigory Orlov, who aided in Catherine's coup. Number 43. One of Catherine's many other lovers was a Polish noble called Stanislaw Poniatowski. After overthrowing her husband, Catherine decided to use her influence to support Stanislav's effort to become the new king of Poland. But once he was in power, instead of supporting policies that would benefit Catherine, he started to introduce reforms that would strengthen Polish independence and reduce their reliance on Russia. Catherine wasn't very happy about this, so she not only broke off the affair but also forced him to abdicate. Number 42. Catherine the Great's successor, Paul I, was notorious for being paranoid and belligerent, and perhaps the best example of this comes from during the Napoleonic Wars. This was towards the end of Paul's reign, when he had completely stopped listening to advice from anyone when it came to foreign policy. He rejected an alliance with Britain against Napoleon's army and also announced that he wanted to invade India. and in 1801 he formally challenged Napoleon as well as a number of other rulers to a duel. According to him, the only way to end the war would be if all of Europe's heads of states engaged in single combat. Let's see how that ended. Number 41. Tensions between France and Russia were boiling over after years of economic disagreements, and Napoleon decided that Tsar Alexander needed to be taught a lesson. An army of at least 450,000 French soldiers marched on Russia in June of 1812. Despite initial victories in Vilna and Vitebsk, the French suffered huge losses during a freak electrical storm that pelted them with freezing cold rain and sleet. Despite Napoleon's confidence, the losses only worsened, and the French were finally forced to retreat when Napoleon realized they likely wouldn't survive the freezing Russian winter. Number 40. Tsar Alexander II survived an assassination attempt in 1880, only to be successfully assassinated a year later. It happened when he was being driven over the Pachevsky Bridge in St. Petersburg on a routine Sunday drive. A member of the People's Will Socialist Organization threw a bomb at the carriage from the bridge's pedestrian walkway, but this only managed to wound the driver and kill some pedestrians, since the carriage was bulletproof. When the Tsar exited the carriage uninjured, he said, "Thank God, I'm untouched." But it turns out he's spoken too soon. There was a second bomber in the crowd and he was killed in a second explosion. And that is still not as gross as what happened to the next Alexander. Number 39. Tsar Alexander III died of kidney failure in 1894 at just 49 years old. The Tsar's funeral was a 17-day event, the largest event the Russian royal family had ever hosted, attended by relatives and dignitaries from all over the world. Unfortunately for the attendees, though, Alexander's embalmers had done a pretty shoddy job and his corpse was already starting to rot. This was especially distressing for his children, who, in accordance with royal tradition, still had to kiss that rotting corpse on the lips. Number 38. Nicholas II was the last Tsar, and his reign was marred by violence from the very first day. His coronation party was held in Moscow on the 31st of May, 1896, and the event included food, free drinks, and souvenir cups for all attendees. But more people than expected showed up, and a rumor quickly spread through the crowd that there wouldn't be enough food and drink. A huge crowd rushed to the refreshments to make sure that they got their share before it ran out, leading to a stampede that killed almost 1,400 people and injured about 1,000 more. And Nicholas II's cursed reign would only get more disastrous from there. Number 37. In 1904, Japan shocked the world by declaring war against Russia. This came as a result of Russia refusing to recognize Manchuria and Korea as parts of the Japanese Empire. The war lasted until 1905, and Japan was ultimately successful. This was the first time an Asian country had declared war against a European power and won. The shock of this loss led to the Russian population losing their faith in the Tsar, which ultimately contributed to the Russian Revolution. Number 36. Nicholas II's son, Zarovich Alexei, suffered from hemophilia, a blood disorder that was incurable at the time. Nicholas's wife, a deeply religious woman, hired a holy man and a supposed healer by the name of Grigory Rasputin to come to the palace and try to treat her son's illness. Miraculously, Rasputin's healing hands were able to consistently stop the Zarovich's hemorrhaging. Even today, it's unclear exactly what Rasputin did that was able to treat Alexei's hemophilia, but some historians think it might have been as simple as convincing the royal doctors to stop giving him aspirin, a blood thinner. But elsewhere, trouble was brewing. Number 35. In 1905, nearly 800 soldiers and sailors aboard the battleship Potemkin protested after realizing the rations they'd been given were rotten. When their appeals were ignored, they responded by simply throwing the spoiled food overboard. The officers were outraged, ordering armed guards to arrest the mutineers. After a brief but violent altercation, the soldiers took control of the ship and returned to the port at Odessa, flying a red flag and firing their guns at the city's government offices and military bases. Then came the horrors from above. Number 34. In 1908, a huge explosion rocked the Siberian wilderness. It occurred near the Tungusa River in what's now Krasnoyarsk Krai in Russia. The explosion was estimated to be between 3 and 50 megatons and produced a shockwave that broke windows and knocked people off their feet, even hundreds of miles away. When locals went to investigate, they found a blast radius of over 770 square miles, but no impact crater. To this day, theories still swirl about what triggered the massive explosion known as the Tunguska event. The leading idea is that an extraterrestrial object, likely a bolide, entered Earth's atmosphere and exploded with devastating force. Number 33. By 1916, people had become aware of the amount of influence Rasputin held in the Russian court, and he'd become one of the most hated men in the country. So a group of men, led by Prince Felix Yusupov, hatched a plot to assassinate him. They invited him over for cards, and then they fed him poisoned cakes and wine. But the poisons didn't work, so they tried shooting him. Rasputin seemingly went down after 3 shots, so they took him to the river. But it turned out that he still wasn't dead. They took one more shot and pushed Rasputin into the freezing cold Nevka River to finally finish him off. Number 32. While Lenin is usually considered the father of the Russian Revolution, the revolution was actually started by moms. The first day of the revolution coincided with International Women's Day in 1917, amidst a huge cost of living crisis sparked by the First World War. Thousands of mostly female protesters marched on the capital city of Petrograd, demanding cheaper bread to feed their children. They were joined over the course of the month of February by students, male workers, and even some high society women, all crying out for the downfall of the Tsar. And fate delivered. Number 31. Zar Nicholas II and his family were executed in 1918 after the Tsar abdicated during the revolution. However, the execution wasn't as easy as expected. The family were meant to be killed by firing squad, but princesses Tatiana, Anastasia, and Maria were left unharmed by the first round of shots. This was because before fleeing the palace, they had almost 3 pounds worth of diamonds sewn into their clothing. The jewels acted like a bulletproof vest, and eventually they had to be killed with bayonets. Number 30. Since some of the Romanovs' bodies weren't located until the 2000s, rumors circulated that some of the children may have survived. In 1920, Jane Doe was admitted to a Berlin psychiatric hospital. The woman, who called herself Anna Anderson, suffered from memory loss and had mysterious scars, and spoke with a Russian accent. People started to believe that she was really the Grand Duchess Anastasia, to the point that there was a major lawsuit over her identity. In 2007, though, the body of Anastasia was found in Yekaterinburg, definitely proving that Anna Anderson's claims had been false. Now with the age of the Tsars truly over, welcome to the world of weirdness that is the USSR. Number 29. Backed by the Soviet government in a bizarre effort to prove Darwinian evolution, Dr. Ilya Ivanov attempted to impregnate chimps with human semen. The goal was to see if they could get pregnant with hybrid babies. And when these experiments failed, he flipped the script and decided to try impregnating a human woman with some semen from an ape that he personally owned, named Tarzan. He found a willing volunteer, but when Tarzan passed away due to an illness, Dr. Ivanov's experiments came to an undignified end. Number 28. In 1933, Stalin had 6,700 people sent to Nazino Island, a small landmass on the Ob River in West Siberian Krai. It was supposed to act as an experimental gulag. However, things quickly went off the rails because of a lack of food and support on the island. Within 13 weeks of being sent there, 4,000 of the prisoners were either dead or had disappeared. The island quickly had descended into anarchy and violence. People were forced to resort to cannibalism in order to survive. The report on the matter remained classified until 1988. Number 27. When Stalin launched the Great Purge in 1934, leading to the execution of over 750,000 of his so-called political enemies, he wasn't out to just kill them. He wanted to erase any evidence that they had ever existed or been associated with him. That's why, using the best technology available at the time, Stalin's men started scrubbing the purged people out of photographs. They also used their skills to airbrush unflattering photos of Stalin, making him look younger and more handsome, and erasing his smallpox scars. R.I.P. Stalin, you would have loved Snapchat filters. Number 26. In 1939, Finland declared neutrality at the outbreak of World War II, wary of looming Soviet aggression. But diplomacy quickly crumbled, and soon the Red Army was marching in. However, the Finnish resistance was shockingly vicious, with guerrilla troops and snipers that managed to rout their larger forces. While Russia did win in the end and Finland ceded 11% of its territory to the USSR, it only counted 70,000 casualties from the 3-month war, compared to Russia's 321,000 to 381,000 casualties. Number 25. Communist theorist and revolutionary Leon Trotsky had made an enemy of Stalin, which is not a great decision if you were hoping to live a long and healthy life. Fearing murder, and for good reasons, he fled to live in Mexico. This, sadly, did not save him. He'd already survived a different attempt on his life in March 1940 when agents of Stalin fired machine guns at his house, but his luck ran out a few months later. Ramon Mercader, a Mexican communist believed to have been working for Stalin, approached Trotsky from behind and murdered him with an ice pick. But it wasn't just humans that the Soviet regime killed. Number 24. In the first of what will sadly be many stories of the Russian government and its associates doing bad things to dogs, they found what they believed to be a cost-effective way to take down German tanks. In 1941, they strapped high-powered explosives to German shepherds that were trained to run underneath German armored vehicles where they were the most vulnerable and explode. How effective these exploding dogs were as a weapon is still hotly debated by historians, but one thing is sure, plenty of dogs definitely got blown up during testing. Number 23. The 588th Night Bomber Regiment was an all-woman group of bombers in the Soviet Air Forces. They flew light and stealthy Polikarpov PO-2 biplanes that let them sneak over German military bases and drop bombs directly onto their targets. Because the planes were hard to hear until the bombs were dropped, which made a swishing sound comparable to a broomstick, the frightened German soldiers nicknamed them the Night Witches. It made for a great propaganda win for the Soviets over the Nazis too. Number 22. In 1942, Stalin issued Order Number 227. Under this directive, he instructed military commanders to form penal battalions made out of convicted soldiers and also establish blocking detachments behind his front lines, with the specific intention of shooting any panic mongers and cowards who tried to escape. Number 21. In the 1940s, with World War II over and the Cold War heating up between the Soviet Union and Western powers, the USSR ramped up its military and nuclear ambitions. To support these massive efforts, they established entire classified towns and cities all across the empire to house people who worked on the development of these projects. People who lived in these closed cities were sworn to secrecy and had to undergo a higher level of surveillance and scrutiny than other citizens. In exchange, they got better wages, better healthcare, and a better range of food products at their local supermarkets. Now, speaking of Russian inventions, number 20. The AK-47 was first invented by Mikhail Timofeyevich Kalashnikov in 1947 for use in the USSR's army. Since then, it's become arguably one of the most widely used weapons in the world, from governments to pirates and terrorist groups. It could fire 600 rounds per minute with an effective range of 2,300 feet and was capable of both semi-automatic and automatic fire. It was widely considered to be reliable in all environments and extremely easy to mass produce. And it's a lot less messed up than our next invention. Number 19. In 1954, during the so-called surgical arms race of the Cold War, Soviet scientist Dr. Vladimir Putin made headlines with a disturbing experiment. He proved that it was possible to connect the vascular systems of two different animals by grafting the heads and forelegs of puppies onto the necks of fully grown dogs. The dogs didn't have a shared stomach, so any food that the puppy consumed was deposited out of a tube onto the floor. None of these chimera experiments that Demikov created lived longer than a month, but it did form a good basis for later transplant research. Number 18. In 1957, Laika, a stray dog caught by the USSR and used as a guinea pig for early space flights, was a crucial stepping stone in getting human cosmonauts into orbit. Of course, like pretty much all spaceflight testing animals in the Cold War, Laika never came back to Earth. She died from overheating inside the shuttle after a likely failure of the R-7 sustainer. Speaking of bizarre deaths. Number 17. In 1959, the Diatlo Pass incident claimed the lives of 9 hikers under mysterious circumstances. The hikers, all students of the Ural State Technical University and led by the experienced Igor Dyatlov, went missing. They were found dead in a mountain pass in a terrifying state, stripped naked despite the freezing temperatures, their bodies mutilated and missing pieces. The mystery has puzzled scientists and paranormal enthusiasts for years. The best theory we now have is that a freak avalanche caused the deaths of these unfortunate students. Still, many questions are left unanswered and likely always will. Number 16. Vladimir Komarov had been a member of the Soviet Air Forces since he was 15 years old, so when the time came to do a manned space mission, it only made sense that he would be one of the forerunners. This, however, would spell Komarov's doom. In 1967, during an attempted landing, there was a malfunction that sent the craft hurtling down to the ground, burning Komarov to death in the process. They had an open casket funeral before his cremation, but what was left looked more like an oversized lump of coal than the remains of a human being. Number 15. After a number of operations revealed that Russian spy networks were stealing information on U.S. technology, the CIA struck back in a way that might have had pretty brutal results. According to the Farewell dossier, the CIA engaged in counter-information efforts that delivered faulty designs over to the Soviet thieves. Some believe that the 1982 Trans-Siberian pipeline explosion came as a result of the faulty designs that they took from the CIA ruse. Number 14. In 1983, Stanislav Petrov, a lieutenant colonel in the Soviet Air Defense Forces, noticed an alarming reading on a satellite early detection system. 5 American ICBMs, likely armed with nuclear payloads, were heading directly toward the USSR. The policy of the time was to send back proportional force, a move that would have caused a nuclear chain reaction, likely causing mutually assured destruction of the world's 2 largest superpowers. However, Petrov exercised caution and called it a false alarm, and he was right. The system had mistaken the reflection of the sun off of clouds for attacking missiles. He would be denied any promotions and would retire early despite saving the world. Number 13. Soviet programmer Alexei Pajitnov changed the world when he invented Tetris in 1985. That one speaks for itself, folks. Number 12. Soviet serial killer Andrei Chikatilo, who'd killed many people over the course of his grisly career, was executed in 1994. He was taken out of his cell and into a soundproofed room in Novocherkassk prison, and then shot once in the back of the head. Number 11. In 1998, the last leader of the Soviet Union did the unthinkable. He starred in a Pizza Hut commercial. Mikhail Gorbachev saw out the twilight years of the Soviet Union, from 1985 to the true dissolution of the state in 1991. And seeing as Pizza Hut was one of the first Western companies to pop up in the USSR 1 year before it would dissolve, it was forever tied into Gorbachev's reputation as a leader and an agent of social and political change. Ironically, Russia was one of the few places that the ad never aired. Number 10. The Moscow theater hostage crisis in 2002 was one of the biggest disasters in 21st century Russian history. Heavily armed Chechen terrorists stormed the theater during a show and held 912 hostages, hoping to use them as leverage to end the war in Chechnya. It didn't turn out that way. There was a grueling 4-day siege which ended when Russian authorities pumped in some kind of chemical agent before storming in afterward. The agents who entered the building were able to kill all 40 hostage takers, but the very gas they pumped in also ended up killing 132 hostages. Speaking of deadly chemicals. Number 9. As a former officer of the FSB, Alexander Litvinenko witnessed firsthand some of the darkest corruption of the Russian state. He was arrested after speaking the truth about the assassination of oligarch Boris Berezovsky. He fled to England with his family, where he continued to be a critic of the Russian government's activities. This would soon cost him his life. 2 Russian agents arranged a meeting with Litvinenko in 2006 where they poisoned his tea with polonium, a radioactive isotope. He lived just long enough to identify his own killer. Number 8. There's footage of President Vladimir Putin doing karaoke at a charity event in St. Petersburg in 2010, all while celebrities like Kevin Costner, Sharon Stone, Kurt Russell, and Goldie Hawn sit in the audience. It was a fundraiser for children, so Vlad was at least busting out the tunes for a good cause, but it was still a deeply surreal thing to see for a man with a reputation for assassinating his critics. Number 7. In 2012, the 23-year reign of terror of Mikhail Viktorovich Popkov came to an end when he was arrested for his vicious series of serial murders. He received 83 convictions for the women he killed, though he actually confessed to 86. As a former police officer whose murders took place over a vast area of land and who tended to target sex workers, he was able to evade capture for decades. And of course, the police were working hard to capture way worse criminals like the ones in our next entry. Number 6. Clamping down on freedom of expression is a common part of the dictator playbook, but Putin made himself seem especially thin-skinned when he went out of his way to ban a particular type of meme in 2017. It was one that depicted him with heavy makeup reminiscent of a drag performer or a clown. Following the law, posting these images could result in a 3,000 ruble fine or 15 days in prison. Number 5. Steven Seagal has always been kinda strange. From beating up stuntmen for real in his action movies to a series of pretty despicable crimes that he's been credibly accused of. And when his film career started to fail, he went all in on toadying to Russia, declaring Putin as one of the great living world leaders in 2014. And in 2016, he was made an official Russian citizen and started spending most of his time there. Personally, we think they can keep him. Number 4. Russia effectively removed itself from the world of sports in 2019 after the controversy around their athletes engaging in government-sponsored doping in previous Olympic events. As punishment, the World Anti-Doping Agency made a unanimous decision to ban Russia for the next 4 years. Number 3. 8 years after the annexation of Crimea in 2014, Russia shocked the international community with an ill-advised invasion into Ukraine in February 2024. It was a move that sparked a huge proxy war between Russia and NATO forces. The move horrified the world, quickly causing near global backlash. As a war that Putin predicted would take months, carried on for multiple years, causing even more insane moments in the process. Number 2. The Vagner Group, a private military company pivotal to Putin's war effort in Ukraine, also took some of the heaviest losses on the front lines. In 2023, the leader of the group, Yevgeny Prigozhin, fought back, openly criticizing the Russian government and saying that the war in Ukraine was based on lies. The rebellion was soon quashed, though, and Prigozhin had an unfortunate accident dying in a plane crash not long after. Now we wonder what could have caused that to happen. Number 1. As volunteer troops quickly ran out over a year into the war, the Russian military needed to get creative with conscription, including giving violent criminals military-grade weapons and freedom to wreak havoc in Kiev. One of those was 44-year-old Denis Gorin, a man who has killed at least 4 people and allegedly ate the flesh of at least one of his victims. Another one was 33-year-old Nikolai Oglobiak, who had been arrested and sentenced to prison for the ritualistic murders of a group of teenagers. Only the best for the war in Ukraine. You've seen the most insane moments in Russian history, but here's something just as crazy. Watch regular things that are illegal in Russia to find out how not to end up in a gulag.